He sat alone on a bench he helped protect, but they saw only his skin, not his scars. The city park buzzed with a Friday afternoon's pulse. Joggers circled, kids shrieked around jungle gyms, and teenagers shot hoops at the court across the field. But on the battered bench beneath the maple trees, Marcus Harris just sat, hands folded on his lap, staring into the branches and losing himself in the gentle sway of green against blue sky. He'd chosen this spot for a reason: quiet, central, and public enough that the memories couldn't drown him. But peace in this city never lasted long, especially for someone like him. It started with footsteps, heavy, purposeful, almost marching in their insistence. Marcus didn't look up. He'd learned long ago that sometimes the best way to survive was to keep still and quiet, as if you could melt into the wood and shadows. "Excuse me, sir. Mind telling me what you're doing here?" The voice was crisp, official, and, when Marcus looked up, worn into the face of a white police officer. The second cop, younger but broader, stood a pace behind, thumbs hooked into his belt. Both wore mirrored sunglasses, though the late sun was behind them. Marcus blinked, his gaze steady, voice even. "Just sitting, same as anyone else." The first officer frowned, glancing at a clipboard, though it was blank. The gesture was for show. "We've had reports of loitering in the park," he said, pronouncing the word like a charge. Marcus shrugged. "Is that so?" "Yeah, gonna need to see some ID." A few people glanced their way. An older couple on a stroll slowed, watching. Somewhere a phone screen glimmered in a teen's hand. Marcus recognized the familiar itch in the air, the way the crowd shifted when uniforms started asking questions. He drew a slow breath. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Is sitting on a bench a crime now?" The second cop shifted, impatience in his posture. "Just cooperate, all right?" Marcus nodded, reaching slowly for his worn wallet. He'd learned that too. Slow movements, always in sight. He fished out his battered military ID, still sharp with the picture of a younger man, square-jawed and clear-eyed in dress blues. He held it out. The first officer barely glanced at the card. "Current address?" Marcus pointed at the apartment building across the street. "Right there. Been living in the city longer than you've been on the force, I bet." The officer ignored the jab. "We'll run this." He handed the ID back to his partner, who stepped aside, radioing something in. Static crackled, words lost in the wind. Now the crowd was growing. Phones were out, faces curious, wary, ready for a story. Marcus could feel their eyes, the ripple of whispers, but he kept his gaze on the trees, breathing in the faint scent of summer grass. The first officer's voice dropped lower. "You come here a lot?" Marcus nodded. "Every day, if the weather's nice." "Why here?" He hesitated, jaw tightening. "It's a good bench." The cop snorted. "Just a bench, huh?" Then, lower, not quite under his breath. "Some folks don't know when to move on." Marcus's lips pressed together. "I'm not bothering anyone." "You sure about that?" The officer stepped closer, lowering his voice. "We get a lot of complaints. Folks feel uncomfortable." Marcus stared up, eyes steady. "I served this country, officer. This park? That plaque over there's got my name on it." He nodded toward a small, rusted sign beside the bench, barely readable in the shadow. The cop's eyes flicked over, skeptical, unmoved. "A lot of folks served. Doesn't mean you get to camp out here." "Camp out?" Marcus laughed, the sound sharp, surprising even him. "You see a tent?" Now the second officer returned, radio still in hand. "He checks out. Name's Marcus Harris, Vietnam vet." For a second, something softened in the older cop's face. Then, just as quickly, the mask returned. "We've still got complaints. Gotta do our job, sir. The younger cop muttered. Maybe he likes the attention. A ripple went through the crowd. Someone whispering, "Why are they bothering that old man?" Another voice, firmer, "Leave him alone." The tension thickened, sticky and electric. Marcus could feel it pressing on his chest. The weight of so many eyes, the anticipation of something breaking. A phone chimed. Someone started filming more openly now. Camera pointed right at Marcus and the officers. The senior officer snapped, "Turn that off!" No one did. Marcus sat straighter, refusing to shrink. "Is there a law against sitting on a bench, officer?" The cop hesitated. The second one shifted, tapping his radio. The older cop turned away, muttering, "We might need backup." Marcus's heart pounded, but he kept his voice calm. "Just sitting, officer, that's all." The older cop glared, then spoke into his shoulder mic. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4. We've got a situation at the West Park bench, requesting K-9 support, possible non-compliance." A hush spread across the park. Even the kids stopped playing, their voices trailing off into nervous silence. Phones multiplied, recording, transmitting, archiving every second. Marcus closed his eyes, jaw set. He'd seen worse, the voiceover would say, if anyone could hear his thoughts. He just never thought it would happen here, at home. Far off, the wail of sirens began to rise, echoing through the park. Somewhere inside, old memories stirred. Distant barks, boots in the mud, the taste of fear and adrenaline. But Marcus sat still, hands on his lap, waiting for the storm to break. The tension in the park hung heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. Marcus could feel every eye watching him, every phone pointed his way, the soft murmur of the crowd shifting from curiosity to concern. The officers, now acutely aware of being recorded, moved with a stiff self-consciousness, as if every gesture was being broadcast live. But that only seemed to make them more determined, less willing to back down. The older officer's lips pressed into a hard line, fingers drumming against his belt. The younger one's eyes flickered between Marcus and the growing circle of onlookers, jaw clenched. Marcus remained perfectly still on the bench, hands in his lap, back straight, as if he were back at attention in some long-ago barracks. He could hear his own breath, slow and steady, echoing the breathing exercises he'd learned decades ago to steady his nerves when the world turned dangerous. This, he reminded himself, was not a battlefield. But sometimes home could feel just as hostile. "Sir, I'm going to ask you one more time. Do you have any other form of identification?" the older officer demanded, his voice raised now, hoping to sound authoritative over the buzz of the crowd. Marcus simply shook his head, offering his driver's license alongside the military ID. The officer barely glanced at it. His mind was made up. The scene was already playing out in his head, and Marcus was cast as the villain. "You got any weapons on you?" the younger cop pressed, voice sharper, a subtle edge of threat beneath the question. "No," Marcus replied, just as calmly, though his heart was pounding. "Just sitting." The older officer stepped back, muttering into his radio. "Yeah, bring Max over. K-9 support needed at the park bench." He glanced back at Marcus with a mix of suspicion and annoyance, as if this request for backup was a necessary hassle. The word K-9 echoed through the bystanders. Anxious whispers spread. "Are they bringing a dog? Why do they need a dog for him?" "This is getting out of hand." Marcus heard it too, felt the sharp twist of anxiety in his chest. A dog, not just any dog. K-9 support meant business. In the old days, that would have meant nothing to him. In fact, in another life, he would have been the one handling the leash, giving the commands, keeping the peace. Now, he was the one being watched, suspected, waiting for judgment. He caught the older officer's gaze, holding it for a moment. "You really think you need all this for one old man sitting on a bench?" "It's procedure," the officer snapped. But even he sounded unsure, aware of the scrutiny from the crowd and the cameras. The weight of public opinion was shifting, even if he wouldn't admit it. Moments later, the distant rumble of an engine grew louder, a city police SUV turning slowly onto the path that cut through the park. The crowd parted, mothers pulling their children close, joggers halting mid-stride. Two more officers stepped out, one holding the leash of a massive German shepherd, the animal's muscles tense, on nose working the air, eyes locked on Marcus. Its handler, a woman with a tight bun and sharp eyes, looked briefly at Marcus, then at her colleagues, eyebrows raised in a silent question. The older officer stepped forward. "We're going to need you to stand up now, sir." Marcus didn't move. "Am I under arrest?" "We just need to clear up the situation," the officer said, tone growing more brittle. The crowd drew closer, tension stretching thinner and thinner. A voice rang out from somewhere behind the cameras. "He's a veteran! Leave him alone!" Another. "Let him sit in peace." The younger cop muttered, "This is getting out of control." But the senior officer cut him off with a sharp gesture. The dog's handler spoke quietly into her radio, then looked at Marcus. "Max here is going to do a quick search, sir. Just follow directions." Marcus looked at the animal, a flicker of something unreadable crossing his face. Something ancient and personal. For a split second, he wasn't here at all. He was somewhere else, in a country half a world away, in the monsoon-soaked jungles with a different German shepherd at his side. He closed his eyes. The sound of sirens faded, replaced by the ghostly echo of rain on metal and the distant bark of a war dog. The world shrank to the rhythm of his heart, the memory of another life. He'd seen worse. He just never thought it would happen here, at home. He opened his eyes. The police dog pulled at the leash, growling low, hackles up. The handler gave a command, voice sharp and professional, and Max lunged forward, barking with a ferocity that sent a ripple of fear through the crowd. Phones trembled in people's hands. Children hid behind legs. Marcus didn't flinch. He just watched, eyes steady, as the dog approached. The officers tensed, expecting compliance or confrontation. The younger cop's hand hovered over his taser, his entire body tight with anticipation. The crowd grew silent. The moment stretched out, every heartbeat a drum roll. Marcus whispered something, barely audible, a name from another time. "Buddy." The dog drew closer, still barking. But then suddenly, Max slowed. He cocked his head, sniffed the air more intently, and took a cautious step forward. The handler pulled back on the leash, but Max resisted, his focus now entirely on Marcus. For a moment, nothing moved. The officers frozen, the crowd holding its breath. Marcus sitting tall and unafraid. The old Marine closed his eyes again, a single tear slipping down his cheek. But he said nothing. He waited, feeling the past and present collide. Behind him, the police radio squawked. The officers shifted, nervously glancing at each other. The handler, confused, called Max back. The dog ignored her, creeping closer to Marcus with a low, uncertain whine. The crowd began to sense something different. A shift in the air, a crack in the tension. Someone whispered, "The dog. He's not attacking." Max was just a few feet away now, staring up at Marcus with searching, soulful eyes. The barking stopped. For an instant, all the noise of the park faded away, replaced by the silent recognition of two soldiers meeting in a place neither expected. The world held its breath. In the next moment, everything would change. The world felt as if it had paused mid-breath. Max, the police K-9, stood frozen a few feet from Marcus, nostrils twitching, as if trying to piece together a half-remembered dream. The officers and the crowd waited, time stretching so thin it nearly snapped. Marcus, for his part, simply sat, his body steady, but inside his heart hammered like a drum from an old battle, and a storm of memories flooded his mind. It was not the present he saw, but a bench of a different sort, long ago, beneath a rain-lashed canopy halfway around the world. The memory came sharp, uninvited. Vietnam, 1969. Young Private Marcus Harris sat hunched against a sandbag wall, boots soaked through, uniform sticking to his skin. Rain fell so hard it blurred the jungle into a watercolor of greens and browns. His squad's tent was ripped by shrapnel. Half his buddies were out on patrol, the others writing letters home with trembling hands. Beside Marcus, under a makeshift tarp, sat a German shepherd, big, black, and tan, with alert eyes and a scar above one eyebrow. The dog's tag glinted. Max. He remembered the smell of wet fur, the tang of gun oil, the faint tremble in his hands as he scratched behind Max's ear. The dog leaned against his leg, steady and unafraid. In the darkness, mortars boomed somewhere distant, and for a moment, Marcus thought he heard his mother's voice carried on the wind. He had wiped at his eyes quickly, not wanting anyone to see tears, but Max just nuzzled closer, warm and silent. They were alone together, a soldier and his dog, shielded from the storm only by their bond. The memory faded, but the feeling lingered, a lifeline cutting through the years. Back in the present, Marcus looked at the police dog again, his eyes shining with something old and unbroken. On the park bench, he whispered, just loud enough for Max to hear, "Is that you, buddy?" The dog cocked his head, as if the sound of Marcus's voice triggered some distant sense memory, one not of commands, but of trust, of shared danger, of nights spent waiting for the dawn together. The handler, her grip tightening on the leash, called again, "Max, heel!" But Max only inched forward, ears perked, tail wagging low and slow, uncertain but drawn by something deep inside. The tension among the officers was palpable. The older cop's frown deepened. "What's that dog doing?" he muttered, more to himself than anyone. The crowd, too, sensed the change. Phones lowered slightly, expressions shifting from fear to wonder. Marcus blinked away the wetness from his eyes. For a split second, he was young again, back in that jungle, surrounded by the sounds and smells of war. But with Max by his side, he'd felt untouchable. He could remember every scar on the dog's muzzle, every bark, every lick to his face after another night spent listening for enemies who might never come. Even now, the muscle memory of tossing a stick, of issuing orders in a low, steady voice flashed through him. Back in the park, Max took another step closer, body language changing from tense alertness to cautious hope. The world around them seemed to soften, the crowd's noise fading like background static. For Marcus, the sounds blurred together, sirens distant and unthreatening, wind in the trees overhead, the whisper of his own name on the lips of a ghost dog. He swallowed hard. "You remember me, don't you?" he murmured, more to the spirit of his old friend than the animal before him. His hands shook just a little as he reached forward, palm open, fingers outstretched. Max sniffed, whined, and inched closer still. A child's voice broke through the hush. "Mom, why is the dog being nice to him?" The mother shushed the child, but the question hung in the air. The older officer shifted uncomfortably. "Get control of your animal," he barked at the handler. "I'm trying, sir," she replied, but there was awe in her voice. not frustration. Marcus's hand trembled, not from fear, but from the overwhelming wash of memories. He could still feel the old dog's weight against his thigh, the way Max would leap to attention at the first hint of trouble, or curl up at his feet in the rare moments of safety. He heard his own voice from decades ago, urging Max to stay in the face of danger, whispering "good boy" after another patrol ended safely. Now, as the police dog's nose touched his fingers, Marcus's breath caught in his chest. Suddenly, a wave of emotion crashed over him. Grief for friends who never came home, gratitude for every moment of peace, longing for days when the world made a little more sense. The crowd seemed to sense the shift. A teenage boy lowered his phone, whispering, "He's not scared at all. Look at them." The younger cop frowned, uncertainty etched into his features. "You ever see a dog act like that?" he asked the handler. She shook her head. "Not with a stranger. Never." Marcus, voice low and steady, addressed the dog, as if no one else existed. "I missed you, old friend. I never forgot." The handler tried once more, firmer this time. "Max, heel!" But the dog ignored her. Instead, he pressed his nose into Marcus's open palm, licking it gently, tail thumping once against the grass. The whole park seemed to exhale, a breath held too long, finally released. Marcus smiled, the first real smile in a long time, feeling a warmth that went deeper than the afternoon sun. For a moment, he felt less alone, a veteran in a park full of strangers, but reunited with a friend who never truly left him. Somewhere nearby, a soft strain of music drifted from a passing car, rising above the quiet, sweet, and nostalgic. The crowd, still watching, seemed caught between disbelief and awe. The officers, their roles now uncertain, hung back, waiting for someone to tell them what came next. Marcus stroked the dog's head, whispering, "Good boy, Max. Good boy." He let the tears fall freely now, unashamed, the world around him receding as memory and reality merged. He was no longer just an old man on a bench. He was a Marine, a handler, a survivor, and for a moment, a boy reunited with the only creature who'd ever truly understood him. The sunlight slanted through the city park's canopy, dappling the scene in shifting shadows as all eyes locked on the unlikely pair. The frail old veteran and the powerful police K-9 standing nose to hand. Max, the dog, had gone utterly silent now, his bark replaced by a low, throaty whimper that made even the hardest onlookers' hearts skip a beat. His handler, Officer Patel, tried again, firmer this time, voice cutting through the heavy silence. "Max, back, heel!" But Max didn't budge. Instead, the massive German shepherd inched even closer to Marcus, tail lowered in a gentle sweep, ears pressed slightly back in recognition rather than aggression. He sniffed Marcus's palm, searching for a memory, and Marcus's fingers, thin but steady, scratched the soft fur behind Max's ear, just like he used to do all those years ago in another life, in another war. The connection was instant, electric, and undeniable. The officers stared, confusion written plain on their faces. The senior cop, Officer Bartlett, bristled, trying to reassert authority. "What's going on here? Get that dog under control!" Patel, the handler, was torn between protocol and the inexplicable bond unfolding before her. He's never done this," she stammered, tugging gently at Max's leash. But Max planted himself firmly by Marcus, ignoring the pressure, all focus on the old man sitting calmly, eyes moist with emotion and memory. A few feet away, the younger officer, Officer Tran, shifted his weight, taser still gripped but now held loosely at his side. His nerves were raw, his voice cracking as he muttered to his partner, "You ever seen anything like this, Bart?" "No," Bartlett snapped, his mask of authority slipping. "And I don't like it. Something's off." His words, meant for only his partner, carried just enough to reach the crowd, but the onlookers didn't see a threat. Instead, a gasp ran through the gathered people as Max, after one more deep, soul-searching sniff, suddenly crawled forward on his belly, the way a dog greets a long-lost master. Marcus's hand, shaking, rested gently atop Max's broad head. "It's okay, boy," Marcus murmured. "I'm here. I'm home." The hush in the park was broken only by the rhythmic thump of Max's tail against the grass and the click of camera phones capturing every second. A small girl, clutching her mother's leg, whispered, "Mom, look. The dog loves him." Her mother just nodded, eyes wide, unable to look away. Officer Patel, visibly shaken, tried again. "Max, heel!" Her voice wavered, and she exchanged a helpless glance with Bartlett. Max paid no mind, his entire being devoted to Marcus. Officer Bartlett growled in frustration and turned to Marcus. "What did you do to our dog?" Marcus smiled gently, voice roughened by age and emotion. "I didn't do anything, officer. Maybe he remembers something you don't." The crowd rippled with curiosity and whispers, a sense of awe beginning to replace suspicion and fear. Nearby, a group of teenagers started chanting quietly, "Let him be! Let him be!" Their words caught on, spreading through the crowd as more people pressed in, all wanting to witness whatever miracle was unfolding. Max's handler, Officer Patel, hesitated, finally letting go of the leash altogether. Max didn't move from Marcus's side. Instead, he pressed his body closer, sitting at attention, but with his head leaning gently into Marcus's lap, seeking comfort and reassurance. "Max," Patel called softly, almost pleading. Marcus, his voice steadier now, looked up at the stunned officers. "You want to know who I am?" He fumbled in his wallet and pulled out an old, creased photograph. It was faded but unmistakable. A much younger Marcus in marine dress, arm around a proud, upright German shepherd wearing a military harness. Written on the back, visible as he held it up, were the words, "Max K-9 Veteran." A gasp shot through the crowd. The photograph was passed from hand to hand, held up for the phones, displayed on screens big and small. Patel took the photo, eyes wide. This is you and him?" Marcus nodded. "Vietnam, 1969. Max was my partner. Saved my life more than once." The crowd buzzed, awe overtaking any earlier suspicion. "That's incredible," someone whispered. "It's really him." Officer Bartlett, suddenly on the defensive, grumbled, "That doesn't mean anything. Dogs don't remember that long." Marcus just smiled and patted Max's head again. "You're right, officer. Maybe most don't. But some bonds, they never break." Max, as if in agreement, licked Marcus's palm and gave a soft, contented whine. Then, in a move that stunned even his handler, Max sat straight, lifted his paw, and placed it squarely on Marcus's knee, the unmistakable gesture of a trained military salute. A murmur of disbelief raced through the onlookers. The energy shifted in an instant from confrontation to celebration. Even the sternest officers stared, open-mouthed, as the K-9 unit refused orders for the first time in city history. Bartlett tried to recover his composure. "Patel, get that animal out of here, now!" But Patel hesitated, looking at Marcus. "Sir, I think Max wants to stay." The world seemed to stand still for one more heartbeat. The crowd, united by the unlikeliest reunion, broke into applause, tears, and cheers. Someone called out, "That's a hero right there!" A woman sobbed openly. Children pulled free of their parents to get a better look at Marcus and Max, two old soldiers, reunited at last. As the afternoon sun dipped lower, Marcus looked around at the faces, so many faces, and felt, for the first time in years, truly seen. He spoke softly, but his words carried, "We all have scars, some you can see, some you can't. But kindness and loyalty, those never fade." Max rested his head on Marcus's lap, content, as if he'd finally found his way home. For a moment, it felt as if the entire world stopped turning. There was a hush in the air, a stillness so deep even the birds in the park seemed to sense it, pausing their song as if bearing witness. Marcus Harris, hands trembling only slightly now, cradled the head of Max. The police K-9 who had, in front of everyone, abandoned his post to nuzzle up to an old friend. All around them, the city park, once so full of casual, everyday life, was transformed into a place of wonder and disbelief. The crowd, growing by the minute, had gone from anxious to astonished. Whispers ran like electricity through the onlookers. "Did you see that? The dog saluted him. That's no ordinary vet." A teenage girl, phone still filming, wiped a tear from her eye. Her live stream was already blowing up. Thousands of comments scrolling up the screen, people arguing, celebrating, demanding answers. A woman near the front, middle-aged and fierce, pointed her phone directly at the officers. "Hey, that dog knows him. Why are you still bothering this man?" The officers hesitated, the authority they wore like armor now cracking. Officer Bartlett, red-faced and at a loss, stared at Max as if seeing him for the first time. This is not procedure," he stammered. But the words sounded hollow in the face of what everyone had just witnessed. Officer Tron looked at his partner, uncertain, sweat beading at his temple as he lowered his taser entirely. Patel, Max's handler, bent down and tried again to command the dog. "Max, return! Heel!" Her voice, usually so steady, was trembling now. But Max remained rooted at Marcus's side, unmoved by authority or training. He rested his head on Marcus's lap and gazed up at him with those intelligent, gentle eyes. Marcus looked down, voice thick with emotion. "He's just saying hello, officer. That's all." Someone in the crowd called out, "That's not all! That dog remembers him. He's his old partner." A buzz of agreement followed. More phones rose, capturing the moment from every angle. Officer Bartlett turned to Patel, voice low and urgent. "Get that animal under control, now." But Patel shook her head, a dawning realization and respect coloring her features. "Sir, I don't think I can. Not this time." Just then, Marcus reached for his wallet and pulled out the faded, battered photograph again. He held it up high for the crowd and the officers to see. In the photo, a young Marcus in military fatigues, crouched next to a German shepherd whose fur looked exactly like Max's. Scribbled on the back for all to see was the inscription, "Max K-9 Veteran." The photo was passed around, hands careful and reverent. People took pictures of it, posting them online in real time. The story began spreading faster than wildfire, first across the park, then across the city as news outlets picked up the live feeds. An older man in the crowd, veteran's cap on his head, raised his voice. "That's a war dog! That man's a Marine!" He saluted Marcus, and a ripple of respect ran through the onlookers. A few people followed, some with military bearing, others simply imitating the gesture out of newfound admiration. Officer Tran, still stunned, asked quietly, "Is that really your dog, sir?" Marcus smiled, lines at the corners of his eyes deepening. "He was my partner. Saved my life more times than I can count." His gaze softened as he stroked Max's head. "Some bonds don't break, no matter how many years go by." Officer Bartlett, desperate to regain control, snapped, This is staged! Somebody put that dog up to this! But as he spoke, Max suddenly rose and, in a protective gesture, stepped between Marcus and the officers, barking sharply at Bartlett. The bark was different this time, full-throated, commanding, a soldier's warning. The crowd gasped, then broke into applause. Some laughed, some cheered, others wiped away tears. The mood had shifted entirely. The tension that had crackled moments before now turned electric with something else. Hope, admiration, unity. Officer Patel stepped back, watching as Max sat firmly in front of Marcus, a living shield. Her expression was one of awe, not fear. "He's never done that before," she whispered to herself. Never. The energy in the park was contagious. Strangers clasped hands, sharing the moment as if it belonged to them all. The air was thick with emotion, relief, pride, disbelief, and a deep, growing sense that something important had just happened. Children tugged at parents' sleeves, asking, "Is that man a hero?" Parents nodded, some with trembling voices, some with wide, disbelieving grins. A local news van screeched to a halt by the curb. Reporters, breathless, rushed forward, cameras rolling. Microphones thrust out. They called, "Sir, sir, can you tell us your name? What just happened here?" Marcus straightened up, suddenly aware of the new attention. He spoke softly, but his words carried. "My name is Marcus Harris. I was a Marine. This is Max. He's a Marine too." He looked down at Max and smiled. "Guess he never forgot me." The crowd cheered again, louder this time. "Welcome home, Marine," someone shouted. Another person pushed forward, a bouquet of wildflowers in hand, and laid them beside Marcus's bench. It was the first of many. By the end of that afternoon, the bench would be surrounded by flowers, handwritten notes, even medals pinned to the weathered wood. The officers, unsure and overwhelmed, fell back, letting the crowd take center stage. Officer Patel, after a moment's hesitation, knelt and shook Marcus's hand. "Thank you for your service, sir," and for his. A nearby elementary school teacher, watching with her students on a class outing, wiped away tears and turned to the kids. "This is why we learn about history. This is why we remember." The moment was captured from every angle, already flooding social media feeds. A Marine veteran, a loyal dog, and a crowd united by their story. Headlines would soon follow. "Retired war dog recognizes former handler in dramatic public reunion." Within hours, Marcus Harris's name would be trending, and the story would spread to every corner of the country. But for Marcus, in that instant, none of that mattered. All he saw was Max, his old friend, his partner, who had remembered him when it seemed like the world had not. And as the crowd pressed in to thank him, to shake his hand, to honor the bond between a man and his dog, Marcus finally felt the weight of the years begin to lift. As the applause faded and the reality of what had happened began to settle over the park, Officer Bartlett's face hardened. He refused to surrender control of the scene, even as the crowd surged with approval for Marcus and Max. His pride was wounded, and a hint of embarrassment crept into his voice. "I still say this is staged," he insisted, louder than before, his words slicing through the reverent silence. "Dogs don't just recognize people after all those years. There's some kind of trick going on here. Somebody trained that dog to do this." There was an immediate reaction. A ripple of disbelief, then indignation. A woman holding her phone up to film lowered it and stepped forward, glaring at Bartlett. "You saw it with your own eyes. That dog loves him. You should be ashamed." The crowd responded, a wave of murmurs building in support. Another man, bearded and broad-shouldered, called out, "He's a Marine! Show some respect!" Someone else shouted, "Let them be! Stop harassing a hero!" Officer Tron, feeling the shift in energy and noticing the number of phones and cameras aimed at him, hesitated. He leaned in, whispering to Bartlett, "Maybe we should just back off. The whole city's watching us right now." Bartlett glared at his partner but said nothing, jaw clenching. Suddenly, Max, still seated in front of Marcus, turned his head and let out a sharp, commanding bark, a sound that cut straight through the mounting tension. But this time, the bark was not directed at the crowd. It was aimed right at Officer Bartlett, who stumbled back in surprise. Max's body language was unmistakable. Protective, warning, a guardian stepping between Marcus and those who meant him harm. The crowd gasped, then erupted. Some clapped and cheered, others cried out in support. The energy had shifted fully. No longer was this just a confrontation between an old man and the police. Now, it was the city itself rising in defense of one of its own. Officer Patel, Max's handler, was stunned. She crouched by the dog, her hand gentle but uncertain on his collar. "He's never done this," she said softly, shaking her head. "He always follows commands. It's like he's choosing him over all of us." Bartlett tried to recover. "This is still a police operation," he barked. But even he sounded unsure now, his words lost amid the commotion. "You all need to disperse." But no one moved. In fact, the crowd seemed to draw closer, emboldened by Max's display of loyalty and the raw emotion on Marcus's face. A group of veterans in the crowd, men and women of all ages, some wearing their old service hats, others in civilian clothes, stepped forward and formed a loose circle around the bench. One of them, a tall black woman with sergeant stripes tattooed on her arm, spoke loud enough for all to hear. "We stand with him. You're not moving him off that bench." The crowd cheered again. A young mother hoisted her son onto her shoulders so he could see better. An older couple, hand in hand, murmured to each other about the Vietnam War and what it meant to see one of ours finally getting the recognition he deserved. In the middle of this storm, Marcus felt a wave of gratitude so strong it nearly overwhelmed him. For years, he'd felt invisible. Just another old man on a park bench, his service and sacrifices known only to himself, and the fading photographs in his wallet. Now, for the first time in decades, he felt seen. Not just as a veteran, but as a man whose story mattered. Patel reached out to Marcus, her eyes full of apology. "Sir, I don't know what's happening here, but it's clear Max remembers you. I've never seen anything like it. Would you mind if we called someone from the K-9 unit's veterinary staff? Maybe they could confirm his identity, or at least help explain." Marcus smiled, eyes damp. "You do whatever you need, officer. I'm not going anywhere." Nearby, the tension between Bartlett and the crowd reached its peak. He drew himself up, making one last attempt to reclaim the scene. "Everyone needs to clear out, now. This is official business." But a chorus of voices answered back. "We're not leaving. You're not the boss here. He's a hero, not a criminal." As the shouts rose, more people began to live stream the standoff. Hashtags like #MarcusandMax and #HeroOnTheBench trending in real time. Seeing that he was rapidly losing control, Bartlett turned to Tran and Patel, frustration plain on his face. "We can't just let this go. If the chief sees this on the news—" But Tran cut him off, his voice steady and quiet. "Sir, with all due respect, I think we need to let it go. This isn't what we signed up for." As if sensing the resolution in the air, Max relaxed, leaning into Marcus's hand with a sigh, his tail thumping against the ground. Marcus laughed softly, his voice like gravel. "You always did know when to step in, didn't you, old boy?" At that moment, a new presence stepped forward. A local reporter, microphone in hand, camera crew trailing behind. Mr. Harris, can you tell us what happened here today? How do you think Max remembered you after all this time? Marcus took a breath, his gaze sweeping over the crowd, the officers, and most of all, Max. Sometimes, when you go through the worst with someone, man or dog, you never forget. Doesn't matter how many years go by, or who's wearing the uniform. Loyalty runs deeper than memory. Maybe that's what brought us both back here today. As the reporter beamed, more people approached the bench, many laying small tokens, flowers, flags, handwritten notes, at Marcus's feet. A teacher with a group of elementary students explained the story to her class, encouraging them to draw pictures and thank you notes for the hero and his dog. A pair of young men, one in a wheelchair, the other in a battered jacket, offered Marcus a coffee and a handshake, telling him, "Welcome home." Back by the police cars, Bartlett's radio squawked to life. He answered curtly, listened for a moment, then turned and stalked away, his authority battered, and his heart maybe, just maybe, a little changed. For Marcus, none of the noise mattered as much as the warm weight of Max against his leg. He felt, finally, like he belonged, not just in the park, but in the heart of the city he'd helped protect. The crowd, having found a new hero, began to disperse, but the sense of community lingered, a shared memory they would all carry. And as the sun dipped low and the last of the cell phones lowered, Marcus looked at Max and whispered, "We're home, buddy. We're home." The moment between Marcus and Max rippled outward far beyond the city park. Videos captured on phones spread with wildfire speed, first on local social media, then across national platforms. It didn't take long for #Marcus and Max to trend, for news crews to set up on the grass, for strangers to arrive, drawn by a story that had touched something deep and universal. Within an hour, clips appeared on every major network. Headlines flashed across screens in diners and waiting rooms. Retired war dog recognizes former handler in stunning park reunion police. K-9 abandons duty to greet Vietnam vet, the bench that stopped a city. In the footage, Marcus's calm dignity shone as clearly as Max's loyalty. The images moved people, the tattered Marine ID, the faded photo, the moment Max saluted. News anchors debated the science of K-9 memory. Psychologists offered opinions. But what mattered most was the emotion in every frame. The way Marcus's hand shook when he touched Max. The way the crowd transformed from suspicious to awestruck. In the hours that followed, the park became something different. A living memorial, a gathering place, a site of pilgrimage for those searching for hope, healing, or simply a story that restored their faith in goodness. Flowers appeared by the bench, brightening the grass with color and gratitude. Small flags joined them, left by strangers and fellow veterans. Someone wrote on a cardboard sign, "This is not just a bench, it's a bridge." Children from a nearby school visited on a field trip. Their teacher, moved by what she'd witnessed, organized her students to start a Veteran Stories bulletin board back in their hallway. The kids drew pictures, a man and a dog side by side with words like, "Thank you for your service" and "Welcome home, Max." One boy left a plastic medal from a cereal box, his note written in crayon, "You're my hero." At first, Marcus was overwhelmed by the attention. He had never wanted to be a symbol. He spent the night in a quiet apartment, answering calls from old Marines who recognized his face or name from television. Men who hadn't spoken in decades but called now to say, "We saw you, brother. You did us proud." He was invited to speak at the local VFW, at high schools, on radio shows. Reporters camped outside his building, hoping for a quote. When Marcus returned to the park the next morning, his bench was covered with tokens, bouquets, hats, thank you cards, and a little American flag on a stick. Max was with him, of course, now a celebrity in his own right. Marcus walked the dog on the same leash Officer Patel had handed him the day before, an unspoken gesture of trust. The police department, recognizing the moment for what it was, announced Max's retirement from service, stating, "Some dogs serve the city, some serve the country. And sometimes a dog's greatest act is remembering the hand that first taught him loyalty." On Marcus's second morning home, a news van trailed him quietly as he walked into the park, Max at his side. They found children waiting, clutching homemade drawings, teachers asking for a few words about history, service, and courage. Marcus sat on his bench, Max's head in his lap, and told stories about Vietnam, about the war dog who could sense a landmine or danger before anyone else, about the friends he'd lost and the brotherhood he'd found. He didn't embellish or dramatize. He spoke quietly, letting the truth do the work. "Some wounds," he said, "don't show on your skin. They're inside, where you remember things or forget them. This dog, he never forgot. I guess that means part of me was worth remembering." As the days passed, local businesses joined the chorus of support. The bakery on the corner left free bread by Marcus's door. The owner of a barber shop offered him a haircut and a beer. A church group raised money for a bronze plaque. And by the end of the week, the city's mayor announced a ceremony to recognize Marcus and Max's story. A rare gesture, but one that felt necessary. Former Marines from across the region started showing up, sometimes in their faded dress blues, sometimes in jeans and t-shirts, all with that same quiet nod of respect. They brought medals to pin to the bench, dog tags to hang from the armrest, and stories to swap, some light, some dark, all true. In the wider world, Marcus's story became more than just a viral clip. It became a lesson. Talk shows debated what it meant. About memory, about service, about what America owed its veterans. Some called for new programs for service dogs. Others raised money for veterans' housing or mental health. A school district announced they would add lessons about military service to their curriculum. The city's social media feeds filled with pictures of families, teachers, children, all gathering around Marcus's bench. People posted messages. He didn't just serve his country. He brought it back together, even for a little while. But for Marcus, the real gift was simpler. In all the attention and gratitude, he saw the power of one small act, one dog's memory, to wake a city from its everyday blindness. On his bench, he wasn't just a loiterer or a forgotten old man anymore. He was Marcus Harris, Marine handler, hero. One evening, as the sun set golden behind the skyline and the park's day faded to night, Marcus sat quietly, Max snoring at his feet. A group of teenagers passed by, and one, brash and laughing, called out, "That's the famous dog, right?" But his friend hushed him, and the group stopped. The teens, awkward but sincere, stepped forward and shook Marcus's hand. "Thank you, sir," one said, "for everything." Marcus smiled, feeling the weight and warmth of the city's embrace. The world could be cruel, could forget, but for this moment, because of Max, because of memory, he knew he'd never be invisible again. The city had never seen anything quite like it. News of the reunion between Marcus and Max didn't just stay local. It became a symbol, a spark for conversations about memory, belonging, and the meaning of service. City Hall's phone lines rang with calls from citizens demanding acknowledgement and change. The mayor's inbox overflowed with emails, some angry, some inspired, all echoing a singular truth. This city owed Marcus Harris, and every man or woman like him, a better kind of respect. Within a week, under pressure from both citizens and the city council, The mayor announced a special ceremony in the park, the very park where Marcus had first been harassed, where Max had chosen memory over training. Flyers went up at local shops. Schools received permission to bring students. Veterans groups sent delegations in uniform, some wheeling in elderly comrades, others guiding service dogs past rows of news cameras. On the morning of the event, the park bustled with a quiet, respectful energy. Strangers greeted each other with a nod or a handshake, united by the story that had brought them together. A temporary stage had been set up not far from Marcus's bench. Flowers and flags framed the podium. On the arm of the bench, where once only peeling paint had sat, was a brand new plaque, still covered by a blue velvet cloth, waiting for the right moment. Marcus arrived with Max at his side, the dog now proudly wearing a brand new collar, polished but simple, engraved, "Max, U.S. Marine, forever faithful." They moved through the crowd slowly, Marcus shaking hands, accepting hugs, sometimes blinking back tears. Children from the local elementary school formed a loose ring around him, some clutching drawings, others saluting clumsily. An older veteran in a wheelchair rolled forward and pressed a medal into Marcus's hand. "For all of us who made it back, and all who didn't," he said quietly. Marcus nodded, words failing him. At noon, the mayor took the stage. He was not a man given to displays of emotion, but as he scanned the crowd, hundreds strong, every face attentive, his voice trembled. "Ladies and gentlemen, we gather here not only to honor a hero, but to right a wrong. When Marcus Harris was asked to leave this park, we forgot who he was. We forgot what he gave up, what he sacrificed, so that we could enjoy places like this freely. Today, we remember." He turned to Marcus, inviting him and Max to join him on stage. Applause broke out, first polite, then growing to a roar as Marcus and Max stepped up. The mayor turned to the officers who'd been involved, inviting them to the front. Officer Patel stood among them, eyes downcast but resolute. The mayor spoke again. "We cannot undo what happened, but we can do better. On behalf of this city, to Mr. Harris and to Max, we are truly sorry." Patel stepped forward, microphone in hand. "Mr. Harris, I want to apologize for the way you were treated that day. I thought I knew what loyalty was. Your story, and Max's, taught me what it really means." Her hand found Max's head and scratched gently behind his ears. "He belongs with you." The crowd, moved by the humility in her words, began to clap again, some even shouting encouragement. A wave of emotion pulsed through the park. Bartlett, the officer who had doubted Marcus most, stepped forward and removed his hat. "I was wrong," he admitted, voice raw. "You taught us all a lesson. Thank you." With the formal apologies spoken, the ceremony shifted to celebration. The mayor turned to the plaque, inviting Marcus to unveil it. Marcus gripped the velvet cloth, voice thick as he read aloud, "Marcus Harris Bench, U.S. Marine, handler, hero, for those who serve, for those who remember." The words echoed across the field, settling like a blessing. The crowd stood in a moment of silence, honoring not only Marcus and Max, but the countless veterans whose names were never etched in stone or bronze. Then came a final surprise. The city's police chief took the stage holding up official documents. "As of today," she announced, "K-9 Max is retired from service. He will live out his days with his original handler, Sergeant Marcus Harris. Max served this city with honor, but his greatest service was reminding us what we stand for." Cheers and applause erupted again. Reporters snapped photos as Marcus knelt to hug Max, the dog licking his face, tail wagging furiously. It was a moment of pure joy, undeniable, honest, healing. After the ceremony, As the crowd dispersed into smaller groups, people lingered by Marcus's bench to leave flowers, shake his hand, or simply say thank you. Teachers took students to see the plaque and explained its meaning, hoping they would remember long after the story faded from the news. Veterans lingered nearby, swapping tales, sharing laughter and tears in equal measure. For Marcus, the sense of belonging was overwhelming. He felt lighter, unburdened, as if the years of being unseen had been peeled away. Everywhere he turned, someone was waiting with a handshake, a hug, a grateful word. Max basked in the attention, rolling on his back for children to scratch his belly, tongue lolling, content in his new chapter. The city, for once, seemed unified, not by politics or fear, but by gratitude and shared history. New friendships sprang up around the bench, neighbors introducing themselves for the first time. Social media was flooded with photos of the ceremony, messages of support, and calls for other cities to honor their own forgotten heroes. In the weeks that followed, the police department underwent additional training on how to treat veterans and the homeless with dignity. The mayor announced new programs to support mental health services for those who had served. The Veteran Stories bulletin board at the nearby school grew, now filled with new stories, some from parents, others from children inspired by Marcus and Max. Every morning, Marcus returned to his bench with Max. Sometimes he was joined by a crowd, other times by only a few close friends. But never again did he sit alone or unrecognized. He belonged, not just to the bench, but to a city that had learned to remember. As spring deepened into summer, Marcus would look out over the park, Max's head in his lap, and smile. The world, he thought, can change. Sometimes it just takes the memory of a dog and the courage to sit where you belong. The weeks that followed the ceremony in the park unfolded with a kind of quiet magic. The city, once bustling past Marcus's bench without a second glance, now seemed to move a little slower, with people pausing, looking, and remembering. The flowers around his bench changed with the seasons. First fresh and bright, then paper and plastic as summer heat faded them, but always present, a constant reminder of the story that had changed everything. For Marcus, the sense of purpose that had eluded him for so long quietly returned. Each morning, he'd walk to the park with Max, passing people who now greeted him by name. Some stopped to shake his hand, others just nodded, a silent salute. Children, especially those from the nearby elementary school, would rush to see Max, their faces bright with excitement and awe. The Veteran Stories bulletin board in their hallway overflowed, filled with new tales and drawings inspired by Marcus and his loyal dog. One morning, a teacher approached Marcus as he sat beneath the familiar shade, Max dozing at his feet. "Mr. Harris, would you come talk to our students? They have so many questions about you, about Max, and about what it means to serve." She smiled, gentle but persistent, and for the first time in years, Marcus found himself saying yes. A few days later, he walked through the school's halls with Max padding beside him, the dog's nails clicking quietly against the tile. The principal welcomed them at the door, leading them through crowds of excited children. In the library, dozens of students sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes wide and full of curiosity. Marcus took a seat at the front, Max settling beside him. He looked around, taking in the bright faces and the wall behind them, covered in drawings of soldiers, dogs, and American flags. For a moment, emotion caught in his throat. But when he spoke, his voice was clear, steady, and kind. "He didn't fight to be saluted," Marcus began, echoing the words the city had come to associate with him. "He fought to be free and to keep others free." He talked about his childhood, about how he joined the Marines and how he met Max in the chaos of war. He told them about the jungle nights, about trusting a dog with his life, and about the friends who never came home. He didn't hide the hard parts, but he never lingered on them either. Instead, he spoke of courage, of loyalty, and of finding hope in unlikely places. The children listened, rapt. When Marcus finished, hands shot up, questions tumbling over each other. Were you scared? How did Max know it was you? Did you ever want to give up? Marcus answered them all, honest and gentle. Yes, I was scared. Everybody gets scared. The important thing is to keep going, to trust your friends, and to remember that even the quietest people can carry the heaviest stories. He reached down to scratch Max behind the ears. And sometimes, the best friend you'll ever have is the one who never says a word. Afterwards, the principal thanked him, tears glimmering in her eyes. You've changed how these children see their city, their history, and each other. Marcus only smiled, feeling lighter than he had in years. Back at the park, Marcus found himself approached more often by people who wanted to share their own stories. Veterans who, like him, had been overlooked for too long, young parents looking for advice, teens uncertain about their future. He listened, always patient, offering encouragement where he could. The city had started to heal around him, little by little, as people remembered what it meant to look out for one another. But not all moments were public. In the quiet of his apartment, Marcus would sometimes wake at night. Heart pounding from dreams of long-ago battles, Max would sense his distress, padding over and laying his head on Marcus's chest until the panic faded. In those moments, Marcus knew the truth of what he'd told the children. Some wounds are invisible, but that doesn't mean they aren't real. One afternoon, as autumn leaves began to carpet the park in gold, a group of high school students came to interview Marcus for a documentary. Their teacher, a young man who had grown up watching his own father struggle with memories of war, led them gently. "What would you tell your younger self, Mr. Harris?" one student asked, her voice trembling. Marcus thought for a long moment, then replied, "I'd tell him to listen more, to judge less, and to never be ashamed of the scars, seen or unseen. Service doesn't stop when you take off the uniform. Sometimes it's just beginning." His words struck a chord. The students shared hugs with him, some promising to visit again, others asking if they could help with the flowers by the bench or start new projects to support local veterans. The ripple effect of Marcus's story was no longer confined to the park or the city. Letters started to arrive from all over the country, some from old friends, some from strangers, all grateful for the reminder that kindness, loyalty, and courage were still possible in a complicated world. In the evenings, Marcus would sit quietly on his bench, watching the city's lights flicker on. Sometimes he'd speak softly to Max, sharing memories or just enjoying the dog's steady presence. Sometimes passers-by would stop to chat. Sometimes they'd simply nod in respect. Marcus never minded either way. He had found peace at last, in being seen, not as a burden, but as a bridge between generations, between the past and the future. He knew he would never be forgotten, not while Max was beside him, and not while the city still remembered the lesson they'd learned together. As dusk settled, Marcus reflected on his journey, not just as a Marine, not just as a handler, but as a neighbor, a mentor, and a living link in the unbroken chain of service. The city was better now, not just because of one dog's memory, but because its people had remembered their own capacity for respect and unity. And as Marcus stood to go, Max rising at his side, he whispered, "Let's go home, buddy. We've still got stories to tell." The leaves on the city's trees turned golden and red, drifting to earth in slow, swirling spirals as the park settled into a peaceful rhythm. Life moved forward. School bells rang, office workers hurried by, and children's laughter echoed across the lawns. But the story of Marcus and Max had left a mark deeper than any headline. People still came, day after day, to see the bench with the new plaque, to lay fresh flowers, or simply to pause, reflecting on what had changed since that remarkable summer. For Marcus, every day was a gift, quiet and full of meaning in a way he'd never expected at this stage of life. Max, now officially retired, became a fixture not just by Marcus's side, but in the community. The dog received a new harness, not for duty, but for dignity, embroidered with a patch that read, K-9 Veteran, Forever Faithful. Whenever Marcus strolled through the park, children and adults alike stopped to greet Max, offering gentle pats and whispered thanks. Some brought their own pets to meet a real hero. Others, sometimes strangers, sometimes old friends, sat on the bench and shared their own stories with Marcus. But it wasn't fame or attention that changed Marcus most. It was the transformation he saw in the people around him. No longer was the park just a backdrop for busy lives. It was a place where kindness seemed to linger, where people were slower to judge and quicker to smile. If he noticed a stranger lingering near his bench, whether in uniform, work clothes, or tattered jeans, Marcus greeted them with respect. And almost always, the gesture was returned. One brisk morning, Marcus arrived at the park to find a young woman waiting by his bench. She clutched a notebook and looked nervous. "Mr. Harris," she began, "I know you don't know me, but my father served. He never talked much about it. But after seeing you and Max on the news, he started to share his own stories. I just wanted to say thank you for reminding him and us that we're all connected." Marcus smiled and invited her to sit. He listened to her story, nodding quietly, then told her, "Sometimes the hardest thing is just knowing someone sees you. You did that for your dad." Tears brightened her eyes as she squeezed his hand. That afternoon, Marcus was invited to a community meeting at the library. He hesitated at first. Public speaking wasn't his favorite. But Max nudged him with a wet nose as if to say, "You're still needed." So Marcus went. He spoke from the heart, not with a rehearsed speech, but with honesty. "I spent a long time thinking I was invisible. I thought the world had passed me by, but I learned, thanks to an old friend here, that sometimes all it takes to change a day, a place, or even a whole city is to remember, to see each other, not for the clothes we wear, the age in our faces, or the color of our skin, but for the stories we carry and the kindness we can offer." He paused, glancing at Max, who wagged his tail. The room was silent, the message settling in. We all want to be respected. We all want to belong. And sometimes it's the quiet ones, the ones you overlook, who carry the heaviest loads. We become a better city, a better country, when we choose to learn from our elders instead of fearing or ignoring them. After the meeting, people lined up to thank him. Some left quietly, heads bowed in thought. Others promised to share his story with friends and family, to teach their own children to look twice, to ask, to listen. Word of Marcus's message found its way onto local news, then onto podcasts and morning shows. A high school civics teacher started each class by asking, "Who's sitting on your city's bench waiting to be remembered?" The mayor announced a new initiative, Respect Never Expires, pairing students with elderly neighbors for conversations, history projects, and acts of service. Max enjoyed every minute of his retirement. He lounged in the sunshine by Marcus's feet, accepted belly rubs from fans, and barked happily at passing squirrels. If he sometimes sat a little straighter when a police siren wailed in the distance, or licked Marcus's hand on a chilly evening. It was only because he understood, better than anyone, what it meant to come home. On the anniversary of that fateful day, the city gathered in the park again. There was music, food, and laughter, but also a ceremony to mark what had changed. Marcus, now greeted as an old friend by people of all backgrounds, was called to the stage. The mayor recited the words from the new plaque. They forgot him, the dog didn't, and in that recognition, the whole city woke up. As the applause faded, Marcus took the microphone and spoke one last time. Don't let anyone tell you respect is something you outgrow or that it has an expiration date. And never forget, sometimes the one who seems quietest is the one you need to hear most. He nodded to Max. If you want to honor us, share this story. Pass it along. Make sure the next time you see someone sitting alone, you remember. Every bench has a history, and every person has a story worth hearing. The crowd stood, moved and inspired, their faces shining with hope and unity. Never judge a person by the clothes they wear or the bench they sit on. The quiet ones often carry the heaviest stories. We are a better society not when we fear our elders, but when we learn from them. If you believe respect should never expire, share this and follow for more stories that remind us who we really are. As the sun dipped low and the city lights flickered on, Marcus and Max sat quietly on their bench, two veterans side by side, knowing finally that their story had become a part of the city's heart.